We want to welcome you to our Cybersecurity Experts webinar hosted by IT Solutions. We are so happy to have the chance to talk to you guys today about cybersecurity. We have a variety of topics and lots of good content to share with you today. So thank you for joining us. So as many of you may know, October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we've been spreading awareness all month long in a variety of different ways. So this webinar is a part of our efforts to continue spreading that awareness and educate people about cybersecurity. So we are ending out our month of October. So this is kind of our last event that we're going to have for Cybersecurity Awareness Month this year. Now, right away, I do want to just mention that the entirety of this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted online for future viewing. For those of you who may have missed it, or for those of you who just want to revisit it in the future, it will be there for you afterwards. So be aware we are recording. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Lexi Potter. I am the Strategic Communications Coordinator at IT Solutions. So I work on our communications team. I've been helping out with spreading awareness this month about cybersecurity. So I'm going to leave all the talking up to our cybersecurity experts, of course, but I am here to moderate the chat. So we welcome you to ask any questions that you may have at any point during the webinar. And what we'll have you do is just go ahead and type your question in the chat. I believe there's a chat section, and then there is also a Q&A section. You can type it in either, and I'll do my best to monitor that, and I'll read it off for you to our experts, and we'll get you those answers. So I'll be acting as your messenger today. And then we will also save the last 15 minutes or so of the webinar strictly for a Q&A session. So if you already have questions in mind and you want to wait to the end, feel free to do that. Otherwise, go ahead and ask as we go, and I'll do my best to keep track of those and cut in and relay those messages to our experts. So as you might have noticed, we do have a panel of cybersecurity experts on the line today. They're going to talk about various different topics on cybersecurity, including how to avoid hacking, how to stay safe on social media, smart devices, and lots more. So they are all currently working in the field of cybersecurity, and they are all alumni of Minnesota State University Mankato. We have our host, Mike Manny, who is the head of our cybersecurity team, and I'll hand things over to him in just a moment.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending. Appreciate this. This is our first webinar, so it's something new for us, so I'm kind of excited. So again, my name is Michael Manny. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for Minnesota State University Mankato. I've been in my role now for about 6 years. Been with the university for 12 years total. In total, I've got almost 30 years of IT experience, so I bring a lot to the position. Working anything from sweeping and building computers to all the way up to infrastructure and cybersecurity now. Personally, I enjoy working on my home theater that I built over the last 2 years and working on my vehicles. Especially, I'm very interested in Mustangs, though I don't have one currently. I wish I did. So, with me I have Matt and Emerson, so I'll let them introduce themselves. Emerson, you want to go first?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Mike. My name is Emerson Drapek, and as Lexi mentioned, I am an MSU alumni. I graduated in 2019 with a degree in computer information technology, and while I was there for my last year, I had the opportunity to work under Mike as the security analyst for campus. Right now, I am currently working as a security consultant for a company called NetSpy up in Minneapolis, doing penetration testing for them. And on my free time, I just recently actually became a homeowner. So a lot of my free time has been devoted to work and repair around the house and playing with my dog. Matt, I will give the floor over to you now.
Gotta go off mute. So my name is Matt Grandy. Oh man, I probably graduated probably like 7 years ago now, something like that. And I've been doing IT security ever since. I've been actually just a security consultant ever since I graduated, doing just security consultant tasks as a penetration tester. Yeah, I've been doing that for a long time now. I am actually out in Colorado. Not back home in Minnesota anymore. So I'm loving it out here, being close to the mountains and seeing snow, which is great.
Great. Thanks, Matt and Emerson. Appreciate you being with us. Thanks for everybody else that's attending with us. So we'll get into some more questions. With all the reports of hacking and data breaches, how worried should everybody be about their stuff getting hacked? Everybody thinks that, there's nothing on my computer, nothing in my email that's be interesting. So why do people need to worry about it? Matt, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, you specifically shouldn't have to be worried as much, but, kind of like social media, really data is really the big moneymaker. So you're kind of the product for social media. And that's kind of what these attackers are going to go for. They're going to try to access that data and potentially sell it somewhere else and make money that way. There's also, the possibility that if they had access to your system, they could launch something like a crypto miner or something that's going to run in the background and just make money for them while your computer is just sitting there idle. So there is a lot of, things they could do to make money off just a normal person. So, you should kind of be, I wouldn't say worried, but like weary of what you're doing on the internet and some of those links that you click and some of those actions that you take. Emerson, I don't know if you have anything else to add or.
Yeah, so I think you have a great point. Worried probably is not the best word to use, but wariness, definitely. An example I think I really like to bring up would be, say, for example, somebody thinking that, oh, I don't have anything interesting, my email's all boring and yada, yada. Well, just think about, losing access or somebody gaining access to your email or even a different account, say like your Amazon account, right? Your Amazon account holds things like credit card information, your address, because most people I know have their packages shipped right to their address. And for a while, when I was using Amazon, like maybe a few years back, every once in a while, if I would log in, and it have been a while, Amazon would ask me, hey, is this you? But lately I haven't even been seeing that. So, maybe you think that what you've got is boring, but let's just say somebody were to gain access to as simple as like your Amazon account, someone could run up a bill like crazy, could probably order things without being prompted, and you would only find out about that later. And then also it's a little bit scary, but they could have access to like your address, right? Like that's pretty concerning as well.
Great, thanks. I use this, in the setting of the college, I talk with the stakeholders here about, think about what happens if somebody who's 18 gets their identity compromised and loses access to their social security number. Think about how devastating that would be to them. They're just starting their life. They're just starting their adult life. They're just starting to look at loans like car loans and auto house loans. Emerson, you just bought a house. Think about 4 years ago when you started college, or 5 years ago, and if your identity would have been compromised, you may not have been able to get a loan. That can have some very long-term consequences. Our email is the center of our life these days. Everything is in email. It's the gateway to, while there may not be any financial information directly in the email, where you bank is in your email. How to get to that is in your email. Your email is the gateway to all these other avenues. So that's, when they say, let's be wary of things, that's one thing we should be wary about is the attackers use all these avenues as gateways to other things. So Emerson, let's start with you this time. What is one area of security that you often see overlooked by people that could result in their accounts being hacked?
So taking a look at emails, and you're totally right. I mean, emails, it's your gatekeeper, it's your gateway to everything. And it's sort of just this entryway into your life. And oftentimes the only thing standing in the way is just a simple password, especially if you don't have something like two-factor authentication enabled, and we'll get to that in a moment. But if it's just a single password, one of the biggest problems is password reuse. or just a slight modification, right? So if you're using the same password that you've been using for 10 years, you use it for different sites, or maybe it's the same password, but instead of a 1, you put an exclamation point. That's a huge problem, especially if it's a long-standing one, right? Because there's probably a really good chance that there's something that you've signed up for maybe 10 years ago that since then has suffered some sort of a data breach, and now your password is out there in some kind of publicly accessible password data breach. And that's the same password you're using for your email, your Wells Fargo account, your Amazon, all of that stuff. So definitely password reuse and the habits surrounding your password management.
Yeah, I'd actually just reiterate that. That's kind of the two things that I had was, MFA, which I think we'll go over in a little bit, but definitely that reuse password. Like there's, a really good chance that, something that you've signed up for, like Emerson was saying, is probably already been breached, and that password is out there on the internet. So there's a bunch of different public data breaches that, are accessible to everyone. There's a lot of private data breaches that, only specific people actually have access to, but, there's a good chance that I probably say all of us have some kind of entry into that database or into those databases where, one of our passwords or more of our passwords have already been compromised and leaked. So that's a really big thing. You don't want to reuse passwords for sure.
Yeah, great. If you look, there's a site called Have I Been Pwned, and it's a play on words. Has my password been owned is what it is. And there's a site that can track all the data breaches out there that are reported to them, and they say, here's where your password has been accessed. So it's somewhat scary to look at, but at the same time, you don't need to worry about it as long as you're using good practices, good passwords, and not reusing those passwords. We'll get to some of those things about how to stay safe with those in a little bit here. And you alluded to this a little bit earlier. Why is hacking so lucrative? Don't people have better things to do with their time?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say it's so lucrative because it works. I mean, it's so easy. A attacker can send out, thousands or hundreds of thousands of emails, and maybe they might get, 1,000 people to respond. But that's still, 1,000 people who are taking some action or entering their credentials that then they can sell later on, or maybe they're, running something on their system. So they have, 1,000 of these applications running where they're just, mining data or mining, different things and gaining, quite a bit of money from just those small amount of people. So they can just send out all these emails, and hopefully just one or two or maybe 1,000 of them will reply back and actually do something. So I'd say it's just so lucrative because it works, and people do unfortunately fall for it and get taken advantage of.
I do see that we have a question in the chat here, if I can break in for a moment. And this isn't to anyone specific, so whoever wants to answer, feel free. But we have a question from Sherwin, and they ask, do you guys advocate the use of disposable emails to sign up for coupons or incentivize surveys, for example? So what are your thoughts on that?
I would say, I think it really depends on the type of survey and coupon that you're looking at, and then also sort of what you're defining as a disposable email. There are sites that allow you to sign up for really disposable emails where you don't even need to log into them. They're actually publicly available. Anybody can log into the inbox. And I would say be wary with those, right? If you're signing up for a survey or or some sort of coupon that also requires you to put in any kind of personal information afterwards, but then you're using one of those public mailboxes, you're not doing yourself any favors, because now there's the potential for that information from that survey to come back to that publicly accessible email. I think a better choice would be if you want to keep all of those incentivized emails and coupons and stuff sort of like, spam out of your main mailbox, either create a really strong filter within your main email account, or do create a separate email account, but using something secure like Gmail or Outlook, and then just using that as your account to access these incentivized things or these coupons. But make sure to use all your proper like precautions in terms of setting up correct like robust passwords and recovery tokens and all that.
Nice. Yeah, I actually don't have anything else to add. That's probably the same thing I would do. I actually have multiple different emails, one more for, all that spam and stuff that I don't want in my main email. So, I mean, it's always a good thing to separate those things out if you can. So just be wary of, the information that you're putting out there for sure.
Yeah, and I'll third that. I do the exact same thing. I've got a separate email that I use for just signing up for spam stuff. A good example is I saw, not email related, but I signed up for a Google Voice phone number because I was looking at mortgage loans. I can't remember what site it was. It was either Quicken Loans or Rate Lender or a site like that, or I was trying to find different mortgage rates. Within the span of a week, I got 50 phone calls on that voice number. Those are 50 phone calls just trying to sell me a mortgage. And that's not including all the other stuff that comes associated with that. So I'm really glad I did that, and I continue to use that number for any kind of spam things that I think might happen. I mean, I was just shocked at the amount of phone calls I got just in the span of a week or two with that. So again, use the same protections you would for your normal account. That information is just as sensitive. That information is just as lucrative. In the combination of all that data is what attackers are looking for. They're not looking for any one specific thing. I use it more for the spam filter than anything else. I don't particularly think it's more secure or less secure, but just for the simple fact of the spam filtering, that way I know all that spam stuff is going to that account. What are some things that people can do to protect themselves and their accounts? Emerson, we'll start with you this time.
Protect themselves and their accounts. Well, the first thing that I would recommend using for like account protection, it would be a password manager. We've kind of harped on it already. I personally use Lastpass, but there are a wide range of perfectly acceptable ones out there. Something that will securely manage your passwords, but then also something that has the option of reminding you to switch or change your passwords every once in a while. And then also that has the feature to auto-generate passwords for you. So a lot of really good password managers will say, hey, you can enable like a 90-day rotation, and then it'll go ahead and it'll rotate your passwords. But the nice thing about a password manager is you can install it as like an extension for a web browser like Google Chrome. And so it will immediately autofill autocomplete fields. So sometimes you don't even have to worry about your passwords like being rolled over, being auto changed on you. And that's a great way to prevent password reuse and also to make some really robust passwords.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I actually don't know any of my passwords except for that master password to get into my. I use 1Password, so to get into that database, I don't know anything other than that. Another thing that people can do is to enable multi-factor authentication. So, it might be a text message or some kind of prompt that you get on your phone or through your email that kind of adds another layer of security that if someone were to get your username and password, they would still have to get access to that alternative service or that secondary device in order to get access to your account. So that's a really big way to protect yourself and your accounts if they have that option.
Yeah, I do the same things. I'm the same boat as Matt. I don't know most of my passwords. Unless it's a password I just haven't bothered changing for some reason. I don't know my passwords because they're all in LastPass. I use LastPass, and password managers are great and they do a really good job, but it's really important that if you do use a password manager, make sure you use multi-factor authentication on it. You don't want somebody to compromise that password and then have access to every single other password you have out there. So it's really important. They're great tools, But again, just like everything else we've been talking about, make sure you're using adequate security controls and make sure you're using good passwords. And that one especially, use multi-factor. I can't strongly advocate for that strongly enough to have multi-factor authentication on a password manager.
Yeah, that's actually really important to have that multi-factor on that password manager. Just for instance, we were on an engagement last week, and we had access to someone's password manager. We were able to pull that database down. We did some things on a system to gather that master password, but then we could decrypt everything on just our system ourselves, and we had access to hundreds of different accounts for that client, and we could access everything we wanted to, just because there was no multi-factor authentication prompt when we decrypted that database. So that's really important to have.
So we've talked about accounts and staying safe with accounts. How do people stay safe online in general? Just social media, email, banking, utilities. Think about all the different sites we visit. How do people stay safe with all those sites?
Man, that's a tough question. I would definitely say, definitely take note of kind of the things that we already said. Have a good password for your account, multi-factor. As far as staying safe, I would probably just stick to, like the normal websites. Don't go to those sketchy websites to potentially get, that, free item or some kind of like, free thing that they'll give you. Chances are it's probably not going to be a good thing to go to that site. I mean, something might happen. So stick to those like those normal, I guess, well-known websites that everyone goes to. I don't know. I can't really think of anything other than that what we've said. Emerson, I don't know if you have anything.
The one thing that I thought about was when Mike mentioned things like utilities and banking and that kind of stuff. A lot of those now have the option to set up with your, at least with banking. I know for a fact that mine, and I bank through Wells Fargo. I know for a fact that they have options where any sort of significant account activity requires like personal verification. So you can set it up to where, I close an account or I withdraw a very large sum. And this is just from, a bank account perspective. That's something that Wells Fargo is going to need vocal confirmation from me to do. So I can go online and say, I want to drain my bank account, right? Well, they might not actually let me do that. They're going to give me a call first and say, hey, we just had a request come in to drain your bank account. Was that you? And those types of protections can be set up for things like, of course, like your account and things like credit cards as well. Same thing with utilities. I know Excel Energy, for example, does have an increased security option where you can enable that, where when you basically like start and stop services and things like that, just so nobody, if anybody were to ever decide to try to do anything wonky with your account, they can't do it without your actual confirmation.
We do have another question here that I see, and this is jumping back to password managers for a moment. So Seth asks, why can we trust password managers? And they also ask, isn't having our password in one place risky? So could one of you kind of elaborate on that?
I'll take that one, because I've addressed this question before, and I have given quite a bit of thought to this one. Yes, they are risky. Nothing we do doesn't have some level of risk associated with it. I mean, Matt and Emerson and I deal with risk every single day, all day long. That's kind of the core. That's really the core of our job is to manage risk. That said, yes, they are risky, but you have to look at what the risk is and compare that risk to not having a password manager. So if you use a password manager to randomize all of your passwords, all of your sites have different passwords, you've reduced the risk of somebody compromising multiple sites because you reused a password. The password managers like Lastpass is one I track quite frequently. They are watching all the time to make sure that they are catching and remediating vulnerabilities. So whenever I compare vulnerabilities to rusting cars. Cars get rust over time. They develop rust holes. Remediating those rust holes in the software means that they've patched them. They've found them that they've patched them. That's the one thing that I look for is a company like Lastpass is actively looking for those things. They're actively looking to make sure that they're keeping your data safe. You can look at sites that don't publish that information, don't publish, hey, here's what we fixed. Or you can look at sites that say, yeah, here's what we found, here's what we fixed. I tend to favor the sites that publish that information of here's what we fixed and here's what we found, because I know they're looking at it, I know they're actively working on it. The companies that don't publish that information, I'm a little bit more skeptical of, because I know the vulnerabilities exist. They may not be found yet, but they do exist. So you have to weigh the risk of of trying to remember passwords, trying to write them down, trying to put them in an Excel file that's easily compromised, or putting them in a little bit more secure location. So there is risk. And I see there's a chat. What is the cost for using LastPass? LastPass has a free version. It's not as nice as the paid version. The paid version that I pay for is for my entire family. It cost me $2 a month. So a total of $24 a year, and I have every person in my family protected by it. And that's for the personal side of it. I don't know what the enterprise costs. So another thing, kind of go back to our topic of how do I stay safe online. We talk about financial security a lot. One of the things I do is I stopped using my debit card online at all. I don't put my debit card online at all. And one of the reasons for that is your debit card doesn't have as many financial protections as a regular credit card does. There are federal protections in place that limits your personal liability for credit cards. Just this year, I had both my debit card and my credit card compromised, and I had to replace both of them. It's difficult to do, but it's necessary. There are newer technologies coming out where credit cards can give you a virtual credit card number. So you can use a virtual credit card number for a specific service, so that if that credit card number is compromised, all you have to do is replace that one credit card, but you don't have to cancel your whole card. That's a feature that I'm starting to see in more and more credit cards, and it's a feature I want to keep looking into. Just be aware of what you're sharing. Especially when you talk about social media, be very careful about what you're sharing and what information you're putting out there. It's not that you need to stop sharing, but just be careful about it and know what you have shared. Emerson, Matt, anything else to add to those?
No, I guess kind of just to reiterate what you're saying about, the information that you share. That is one of the places that we look for, valuable information when we are targeting an enterprise or some kind of, client. We look at social media to see what kind of data those people are presenting. They're just sharing with everyone. And that's kind of one of the things that we look for first in order to gain a lot of data that we can then use to then, potentially, send phishing emails or exploit systems or do something like that. So really just be careful about, what you're sharing online for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, that just kind of reminds me of the first time I actually flew out of country was I flew into a different country. I'm not going to say where, but it was somewhere that has a pretty high rate of financial crime, especially relating to like pickpocketing and identity theft. And I told my bank, and my bank said, well, we don't see that you have a credit card. And I said, well, why does that matter? And they said, well, you're going to just want to take that with you there exclusively, because if you lose it or it gets stolen, it's not your money that they're spending. And I think that's a huge thing to remember, that, it's obviously you're going to want to cancel it and make sure your bank is aware that if you ever feel like your credit card has been compromised. But at the end of the day, also, it's not entirely the end of the world if somebody's stolen your credit card and is running up charges on it, because banks, like Mike said, have plans in place exactly for something like that. And it is not money that's coming directly out of your account that these attackers are attempting to spend either.
We have another question here that just came in from someone, and they ask, how safe is it to use apps like Apple Pay, Google Pay, and Samsung Pay?
The only thing I really kind of have a little bit insight into is Apple Pay, just because I think that when you use that, it doesn't actually send your like Apple card number or a specific card number to that vendor or whoever you're paying. I think it generates a unique ID and then uses that. I can't say that much about the other two. I don't know if Mike or Emerson can.
From what I know about them, they're very similar, where they don't send the actual card number. It's called a tokenized card number, so it's a representation of your card number, but it's not the actual card number.
Then someone asked as well too if you guys have any insight on the safety of PayPal.
I use PayPal quite a bit. I actually do trust PayPal. They've been around for a long time. And again, PayPal has protections in place on their systems, and the only thing I pay through PayPal with is my credit card. So even if PayPal is compromised, I'm still protected by the backup protection of my credit card.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think PayPal kind of originally kind of got I guess started on the wrong foot with like a bunch of scams and stuff, but I know they've done a lot recently and they have a lot of protections in place to protect both of the end users. So I would say PayPal is really good. I use it as well, but also through a credit card. So.
Thank you. And then we have another person has added on to that. What about Venmo? So I know lots of college students use apps like Venmo and Cash App. So any insight there?
So I could take that one. Actually, a friend of mine was working on a project recently that showed that, well, let me take a step back. Venmo, I don't believe to be any more insecure than any of the other payment apps that we had just discussed. However, I will say that when using Venmo, I would encourage you to use the private payment method. And the reason for that being is that the public payment method is not only just public to your friends, it is actually public to the entire world. So Venmo has, and they may have patched it at this point, but last year had essentially a way of publicly accessing all of the public payment records. So anytime you went ahead and requested or paid a friend using the public option, that was logged somewhere and was accessible by anybody. So while that's not necessarily, a huge risk in seeing, oh, I just paid my friend for pizza or something like that, it's still a little bit unnerving to have that type of information out there. So I would recommend, if you're using Venmo, to go with the private payment option.
Yeah, I would agree that they are pretty much secure as those other options. One other thing that I would kind of say to be aware of is make sure that whoever you're sending that money to is the actual person that you want to send money to. I know someone not too long ago who was buying something pretty expensive. I think it was within like a few $1,000s or something like that. And they sent it over, I think Venmo, but they sent it to the wrong person. So there's no way to really get that back unless that person refunds it. I believe, I don't think there's any way to get that back. So they had to like contact that person, and hopefully, thankfully they were nice enough to send that money back or not accept that transfer. But you really want to be sure that you're sending it to the right person.
And then we have someone asking about Cash App as well. I'm not sure if you have any specific advice related to that, or maybe it's just similar to the rest of the apps that you guys have mentioned.
I think it's pretty much the same as those other ones as well. Mm-hmm.
Right, so with all these, the new thing is smart devices in our homes, smart switches, smart outlets, smart TV, smart this, smart that. Is there anything to worry about with these? It's just an outlet, it's just a remote, it's just a thermostat. What can hackers really do with these? So what if they turn off my TV? So what if they turn up my heat? I'll just turn it back down.
I can take that one first, Emerson.
Yeah, sure.
So, Yeah, I honestly would be concerned about these devices. You don't really have a way to, determine how secure they are. A lot of these things they'll have, installed on your in your network with like default credentials or something like that. So, if an attacker were able to get access to that, they have access to every other system on your network potentially, depending on, how you have it set up. But it could be that foothold into the network that the user needs. And you can't really determine how secure these things are. They're usually, kind of the software is kind of hidden, or the hardware that everything's running on. You don't really know kind of what's going on in the background. But that's just me.
Yeah, definitely. Oftentimes it's really difficult to tell, like you said, the security of a device. Almost always they ship with some sort of default credentials, which can easily be looked up online. How do I log into my smart light bulb or whatever? And if that device has an internet connection, now you might have a compromised device on the same network that you have your personal computers or other devices. So now if somebody were able to compromise, yeah, sure, maybe it's a smart light bulb, but really what it is it's a beachhead into your network. And another thing I think that's a little bit concerning with a lot of those smart devices is the potential for personal data collection. We don't really necessarily know what those things are sending back to their manufacturers. There's a good example of like smart coffee makers. They will send usage statistics back to vendors who will then attempt to target you with ads. So for example, if you buy a smart coffee maker off of Amazon, there's a good chance it could be sending data back to Amazon. So Amazon can then start targeting you with ads for coffee beans and for coffee mugs because they know that you bought this and are using it. And so that's a little bit concerning too, that someone somewhere knows when I'm making a cup of coffee, and I really don't like that idea.
Great insight, and that's quite interesting. So we have a question from Kate, and they are wondering if you have any specific insight on the Alexa device specifically, or maybe if you have any insight on specifically smart speaker devices.
Oof. Go ahead.
I would say they're incredibly useful, and I think for the most part, Amazon, Google, the major players are pretty good about making sure that the current generation is secure. The issue I have with them is not so much that the current generation is secure, as that they have such a short lifespan. These vendors are always trying to make money. They're trying to just sell you the newest device, but they're going to put all their effort in those newest devices. I think Amazon's on the Generation 3 Echoes right now. So what happens with those Generation 1 Echoes? I honestly couldn't tell you for sure, but my suspicion is they're going to kind of stop supporting them at some point and say, yeah, we're just not going to put any more effort into those devices. So they while they may be secure when you buy them, and they may keep them up to date for a period of time, they're just like anything else, they're going to get old. People worry about the privacy of those devices. I think that there's been enough media coverage with those devices that the companies have done their best to limit that privacy. And I'm honestly not concerned about my personal stuff on Amazon with the Amazon Echoes. Yeah, there's always a risk, but I think it's relatively low. But I think the bigger risk is just as those devices age. Matt Emerson, anything you want to add to that one?
No, honestly, I think you said it perfectly. I don't have any more to add to that one.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would have said was that, the idea, those devices in the home it's always a contested subject, right? You have this smart device, very smart device, right, with a lot of functionality that's there present during, some of life's most intimate moments. And so, they receive a lot of scrutiny for that. And that scrutiny and publicity is probably what does keep them, in their secure state. So I think, like Mike said, it ultimately comes down to sort of a risk appetite versus convenience. Do you like the services that they offer? And are you okay with, that low level of risk? And of course, keeping up to date on all the devices and the patching And the newest devices to it is certainly, if you're concerned, oh, I have an Echo One, maybe it's time to upgrade. That might not be a bad idea either.
So I think we got one more Q&A question, then I'll move on to our last question before we end. See another one. So besides virus protection, is there anything else I should install on my smartphone to prevent malware or ransomware? What can I do to prevent malware or ransomware? I would say that is pretty much the same, probably follow the same rules as you would with your computer with your smartphone. A smartphone, the one thing that I would say differently there is make sure you're using the official store. So make sure you're using the official Apple App Store, make sure you're using the official Google Play Store. They do an incredible amount of vetting to make sure that the apps that go in there are safe. Are they 100%? No, they're not 100%, nothing yet, but at least they're doing their best. Next question is, what are your thoughts on the Ring doorbell? Matt Emerson, you want to take that one?
I think regards to, I think the last data breach, I would assume is kind of what the question is. I think they kind of handled that pretty well. They did a lot of work to patch everything. I would say it's pretty secure now. I don't really have a lot of insight into that. I have a different type of doorbell personally, so I can't really talk too much about that. Emerson, I don't know if you have anything more.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. I think just the fact that they were able to responsibly disclose even the data breach was good. I think maybe, it bears mentioning, and I sort of touched on it when we were talking about Alexa, but when it comes to just smart devices in general, it's always this battle of accepted risk versus, the type of conveniences that you want to get out of these devices, right? So just always kind of making that sort of weighing those decisions in your mind, because sometimes maybe there isn't necessarily a clear-cut answer, like, is this device secure or not? But if you find yourself constantly questioning, oh, do I really need this doorbell? I'm super concerned about XYZ. Maybe that's not a device for you, right? So that's always something to keep in mind too. Is just there's always a good element, I think, of sort of gut instinct when it comes to trust with these things as well.
So let's move on to our Q&A, and then we'll take just the last couple minutes, and I'll ask one final question.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just going to break in for a moment here, and I'm going to go over just a couple of quick reminders before we jump into our Q&A. We have about 10, 15 minutes left. In just a moment, we'll jump into Q&A, but first, just a couple of things. A reminder that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted online for future viewing. So that's going to be up on our website and our social medias afterwards. And then also just another reminder to stay in touch with IT Solutions for the latest on cybersecurity and campus technology. You can visit our IT Solutions website for tech help, resources, and support at mnsu.edu/ITS. And if you're looking specifically for our cybersecurity resources, you can go ahead and explore our Cyber Aware website. That's mnsu.edu/cyberaware. And then you can connect with us on social medias as well. You can find us on Facebook at ITSMSU and also on Twitter at ITSMNSU. So we're pretty active on there. We're always sharing tips about technology and cybersecurity pretty much every day. So let's go ahead and open things up for our Q&A for the last 10-ish minutes here. It's just going to be the same format. Go ahead and type your questions in the chat or in the Q&A section, and we'll read them off for you. All right, so the first one comes from Anonymous. So could you please address the use of antivirus protection and anti-malware software? If using Windows 10, are these still necessary? If yes, any software recommendations?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of a bad candidate with that. So like with Windows 10, I just use that Microsoft Defender, whatever that is considered now. I don't have any other type of antivirus solutions on my system. But, with that said, I'm always pretty wary of everything that I click on. I don't download any type of, programs that I might not really know about. I'm really, kind of conscious of what I'm doing on it. So I don't know if you other guys have any other insight into other AV solutions that you might use.
I just use straight Defender. I mean, it's in all the reviews that I've read over the last few years, Defender has gotten incredibly strong. As far as whether they're still necessary, they're absolutely necessary.
Mhm.
Yeah, they are absolutely necessary because the threats are still there, whether you see them or not. The Defender has gotten incredibly good, and it's one of the nice things about having it in Windows 10 is it's just there, and you don't really need to think about it. There's other software out there like Malwarebytes, there's Avast, there's Symantec, there's any number of other pieces of software out there that do just as good, and they all have just a slightly different take on the same thing. But for the basic purposes of antivirus, I think Microsoft Defender is good enough.
Yeah, I think one other thing to note, and Emerson, correct me if I'm wrong, but being kind of from the security side of things, when we're targeting an organization, we're going to have to try to bypass Windows Defender or whatever AV solution they're using. And usually it's kind of a challenge every time that we some things that we used a couple weeks ago might have been caught on by Windows Defender, and we're going to have to change our tactics quite a bit. So I think Windows Defender is always being updated. They're always pushing out new things to that. I think it's a great utility to use. So definitely always keep that on your Windows systems.
Yeah, definitely. Like Mike said, they have came a really long way, and yeah, full disclosure, that's all I use on my Windows system as well is Microsoft Defender. I mean, it really does a pretty darn good job. And yeah, like you mentioned, Matt, you on an engagement, you run into Windows Defender, you're like, oh crap, like
Yep.
this sucks, because like it, a while ago, it really kind of had the reputation for being just sort of the lazy security guard. But now, I mean, that security guard's been in the gym. It's really good at stopping things. And the team that's in charge of developing that, I mean, they constantly monitor new and growing threat lists. So like you mentioned, maybe an exploit would have worked a few weeks ago, but now Microsoft Defender's released a new patch that protects against it, and you're just now that much more secure.
We have a really great question, and this one's good for you, Mike. Is Microsoft Defender automatically on and updated on university equipment or a device from the university?
It is. Microsoft Defender is something you can't actually uninstall. You can't get rid of it. that's one of the things about it within Microsoft Windows 10 is that you might be able to replace it with something else, but you actually can't get rid of it.
And then just a follow-up question too on the second part of that. Do updates happen automatically, or is that something they need to go in and kind of check for updates and click?
No, we push those updates automatically. Microsoft pushes them automatically. That's one of the products that Microsoft is actually really, really conscious about making sure the updates get out there multiple times a day, not just once a day, or once a week or once a month. It's multiple times a day that Defender gets updated.
Okay, any last thoughts on Microsoft Defender? Otherwise, we have another question in the chat here. Should you invest in getting your own VPN? So we're switching topics a little bit here.
Emerson, Matt, you use it. I have an opinion about it, but I'll let you guys answer first.
I would say it depends on where you are and what you're doing. So a really good reason to want to have a VPN, for example, is if you're going to be doing a lot of work over, say, like an open Wi-Fi connection. So like you go to a coffee shop or something, having a VPN for that would be great, because now you essentially have a secure tunnel between your device and whatever you're attempting to do out on the internet. That would be kind of my take on that. If you don't find yourself in that situation a whole lot, you find your computing needs are, like the average university student, you're not necessarily engaging any kind of sketchy behavior or anything like that, I would say that it's probably not a necessary accessory.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's really good if you're going to be like at a coffee shop a lot and, maybe you're doing some sensitive stuff on that network, like banking. It's a good idea to have some kind of VPN, but you always kind of have to be worried about that VPN provider that you're using. So you can't really control your traffic, control that endpoint where that traffic's going to. So, if you're using some kind of like larger, well-known provider, that's not really something you have to worry about too much. But it should kind of still be in the back of your mind that, there is that possibility of that that VPN endpoint being compromised.
Great. Yeah, I would echo those same sentiments. I'm very wary of VPNs because of that aspect of it. They definitely have good uses. There are definitely uses for them, but you're trusting all of your data to that one provider, making sure that they're not tracking you, making sure that they're not decrypting it in the middle. We call it a man-in-the-middle attack. So a well-known provider that has been vetted by multiple security professionals, you probably don't have much to worry about. But if you're just going to the free and cheap option just to get around something, again, know what you're doing and do your research.
I was just going to ask, correct me if I'm wrong, but does the university still offer a VPN option for all the students to use the university servers as a VPN point?
We do, but it doesn't function the way that a typical VPN provider would. It only provides VPN services to the inside of the university.
Right, gotcha.
I was just gonna kind of add on there, but at least the router that I use allows you to create a VPN profile, so you can potentially just VPN into your home network, and then you kind of know where all that traffic's going. You can control that that endpoint, and if you will, because that's all on your own network. So, if you don't want to go with some of those larger providers, there might be an option to create your own, but that might be a little bit of work there, though.
We're coming up on our time, so on the last one, my one last question for Emerson and Matt. Matt, we'll start with you. If there's one thing you want people to take away from this webinar, what would it be?
Ooh, one thing, it would be just to use multi-factor wherever you can. I think that's probably my go-to. That's going to protect your accounts. Even if you have a bad password, don't have a bad password, but if you do, that MFA will help to protect that. So anywhere you can, I recommend turning that on and using that.
Emerson?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. I would say strong passwords are good. And then adding multi-factor is better. So make sure you're not reusing your passwords. Make sure that when you do change them up, that they're robust, and that also that anywhere that you can enable it, you try to use some sort of multi-factor authentication solution.
You can tell we're all from the same bread. We're all professionals. My suggestion is also multi-factor. I've read a couple of reports that say that Microsoft reports that it protects 99.5% of password attacks against their systems. I don't know where else we can find that kind of level of protection. It's just such an important thing where it's one of those pieces where attackers just cannot get a hold of it very easily. Obviously, there's nothing 100%, but it's so difficult to get around. If they have multi-factor, most of the time the attackers are just going to move on. Well, thank you everybody for attending. I appreciate it. This has been, I think, wonderful. Thank you especially to Matt and Emerson for being our guests today. Lexi, if you want to just close us out.
Yeah, so we want to thank everyone for attending today, and thank you all so much for all your wonderful questions. And we hope you connect with us on our social medias. Check out our Cyber Aware website. We'll be posting the recording afterwards. And just thanks for coming. All right, bye everyone.
Bye. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. We'll see you later.